those who are asserting the accusation of apartheid are normally representatives of countries that don't care about human rights. So if they're turning to Israel and they're saying, you're guilty of racial separation, you're guilty of providing extra legal rights to the Jewish population, which is untrue, but nonetheless, if they make that assertion, it's not because they're so concerned with equality and rights in their own countries. What perhaps captured the imagination of those who made the accusation that Israel is an apartheid country is the idea that Israel has colonial roots, just like other societies or countries that might have existed in the past in the international community. And if you go back to the first times at the United Nations, when this analogy is put forward, which is really December 1973 in General Assembly, and you look at the succession of UN General Assembly resolutions, the famous resolution 35 years ago this month at the International Conference on Women in Mexico City, which laid the groundwork for Zionism as racism. You look at those resolutions and you see repeatedly references to Zionism with apartheid, with Portuguese colonialism, with imperialism. In other words, the reference points are chiefly to this notion that Zionism was a colonialist movement. Identifying this point, I think, is important when we develop a counter-strategy for defending Israel's name. Because if anything, anyone who knows the history of Jewish nationalism, of the Zionist movement, we know we are far from anything that's related to colonialism. But we are an authentic national movement. You know, even if you go back to the 1922 Mandate for Palestine, approved by the League of Nations, the mandate didn't create some new right of the Jewish people to this land. The mandate didn't come forward and say, okay, we, the colonial powers who won the First World War, are now creating a right for this people. If you read the mandate carefully, what you see is that it states recognition has been given to the historical connection of the Jewish people with Palestine and to the grounds for reconstituting their national home. What does that mean? What that means is that the international community after World War I recognized a pre-existing right of the Jewish people to this land. It wasn't as though the imperial power said, okay, now we're going to have this other little colonial entity in a little piece of the former Ottoman Empire. It was a pre-existing right. And that's why they could use the language to reconstitute their national home. The analogy between Israel and apartheid is completely baseless. It's baseless for the reason Professor Shimoni mentioned. It's baseless for the reasons that those with any experience in South Africa who come to Israel and see what's going on here understand. It's baseless because Azmi Bouchara, who appeared on his YouTube clip, was a member of Knesset and could never have been a member of the South African Parliament under apartheid had he been a black person. But nonetheless, the assertion is made. And I think we have to understand this in the larger context of what we call delegitimization. An effort to say that the Jewish state has no rights, either in international law, international custom, or as a result of an international consensus. And the connection to attaching to Israel the label apartheid, colonialism, is part of that effort. And I don't think it can be rebuffed only by sending a film crew into Hadassah Hospital's emergency room to show all the Arab patients, to show the Palestinian Arab doctors who work there. But I think it has to be debunked by getting to the heart of the motivation. The attempt to paint us as alien in this region. The attempt to eradicate our historical connection with the land. That's why delegitimization is not just UN resolutions. Delegitimization also involves erasing Jewish history.